אלינו המשפטן הבכיר, פרופסור דרשוביץ, מבכירי עורכי הדין בארצות הברית. פרופסור דרשוביץ, hello, it's good to have you with us.
Shalom, fine.
The Israeli police have recommended that Netanyahu be indicted in 3 separate corruption cases. Do you think it will end up with a criminal indictment for the Prime Minister?
I think it would be very dangerous to Israeli democracy if it ended up with criminal charges. Each of the charges involves political activities, the probing of the minds of journalists and publishers, the probing of the minds of prime ministers. Once police and prosecutors start asking questions about why certain actions were motivated, it really endangers both freedom of the press and democracy. Consider the Yediot case, where dozens of legislators eventually voted for the law that would have helped Yediot, and many of them got good coverage after that. Do we want to investigate every legislator that voted for something that helped the media in the hope that maybe that person would get good coverage? Mm-hmm. That is the road down against freedom of speech and against democracy that I think Israel should not take.
Let's talk about case 4000, which the state prosecutor considers to be the most serious case. Prime Minister Netanyahu is claiming that positive media or coverage to positive items, to his words, is not a bribery. What is your take on it?
I think he's absolutely right about that, because every politician wants good coverage, and every politician acts so as to get good coverage. Once we start analyzing the motives of why a politician did certain actions, and in this case, Netanyahu didn't even have the power alone to bring about this result, but once we start probing the motives, then I think you endanger democracy. If you don't like what Netanyahu did, vote against him at the polls. But using and weaponizing the criminal justice system in a political context is a serious mistake for democracy and freedom of speech.
Mm-hmm. You were talking about voting. Netanyahu denies any wrongdoing in all cases and claims to be the victim of a political witch hunt involving the media, the left, and the police. Do you see any similarities to what is going on in the U.S. at the moment with President Trump's investigations?
Well, every case is different, but in both instances, what we see is the use of the criminal law to effectuate political change. The decision whether Netanyahu is the prime minister or whether Trump is president should be made at the ballot box, not by prosecutors, not by the police, and not by judges. The cases, the facts are, of course, all very, very different. I don't like the word witch hunt. I don't believe that there is a witch hunt either in the United States or in Israel, but I do think it's a mistake, a politically mistake, a legal mistake, a constitutional mistake, to start inquiring into the minds and motives of both politicians and people who run the media. There must be breathing room. There must be freedom to operate both politically and in the media for democracy to work effectively.
Mm-hmm. You often go on Fox News explaining why there isn't any real legal case against Trump and it's just a matter of people wanting to take him down. Prime Minister Netanyahu claims the same on his matter. Do you think it's the matter of the left not being willing to accept the election's results?
I don't ever comment on Israeli politics. I only comment on the law where I'm an expert. And all I can say is that whatever the motives are of prosecutors of the police, and I know Attorney General Mandelblit well. I have the greatest and highest respect for him. I've known him for many years since he was in the Army, and I do not believe that he would ever be politically motivated. That's not the same as saying that he couldn't make a mistake. I think it would be a mistake to prosecute somebody based on what he was thinking, what he was intending, what the interaction was between the media and a person of politics, whether or not it was a quid pro quo or whether or not there was just a hope to get better coverage in exchange for some positive view on politics. I don't think those are the kinds of issues that should be the basis for a criminal prosecution. They are very much the kind of issues that should be the basis for how people vote. You mentioned the word wrongdoing. Wrongdoing is not a crime. Wrongdoing can be a sin. For something to be a crime, it has to violate specific laws, and it has to be clear. And both the United States and Israel have concepts called lenity, which means that in a close case, when there's ambiguity, you always err on the side of the person being accused, not on the side of the prosecution. And I think the concept of lenity plus freedom of the press plus freedom to operate politically all push against there being criminal prosecutions in the case against Netanyahu.
There is a growing pressure by some parties in Israel on the Attorney General to release his decisions before the elections, which are held in April. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, in the United States, we have a rule that prohibits the Justice Department from releasing information or indictments on the eve of an election. In fact, the former head of the FBI, Comey, was very much criticized for making statements about Hillary Clinton, which may have cost her the election on the eve of the election. So I think it's much better from a legal and constitutional point of view to wait until after the election rather than to do something that could influence the election. Attorneys general, police, prosecutors are not supposed to be influencing elections. They're supposed to simply be applying the law. So I think it's better policy to wait until after the election before any decision is made whether to charge, indict, or prosecute.
Professor Alan Dershowitz, thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you.